So what we're going to be jumping into, by the way, and let's go ahead and look at the monitor, Meshtastic LoRa. So I got one of these things way back in the day, and I was using it early on, and it was pretty terrible. I do a lot of maker development, designing stuff, and overall it just didn't work that well. But now it is evolved and it is very effective. And I've been using it around town, testing it on camping trips and things like that. And it was working great with my friends. One of my friends was already into it. So we found ourselves already communicating with a mesh grid. Now, the whole idea is you have a little radio that can piggyback off of other radios. So you create a meshed network to be able to exchange information around. Now, with that meshed exchange of information, you're then able to, bridge further than a typical radio would have, or more importantly, in a situation where your phone might not have good connectivity, you are now having a radio that can give you better connectivity. And I'll be walking through everything about it during the stream and breaking it down, and I'll be breaking it into clips and putting those out so that we can, be able to reference it if we ever needed to. But let's just get started, and I'll jump into the fun one, which is I have two of the devices right here. So this one I had as my very first one that I put together, and it actually has a nice little menu interface so that you can navigate around inside the menu, see what kind of messages you're receiving and such. It has a GPS. It has its LoRa antenna. And inside of it, we'll be doing a little breakdown on how this thing actually works, how these boards operate. Got my tools to take them apart. And then for this one, same kind of deal. It's got its nice little antenna. It does have a display. It's a little more rugged, and I already loosened the screws so I can take that apart too and show how it works. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump. We'll jump right into it. So, first things first, I'll take apart the one that I already have the screws a little loose on just to give a breakdown on what's inside of this thing because it's pretty neat. So, and let me get it unplugged from my machine. We'll go from here. And yeah, now you see the perspective of me holding it, right? This thing is this small and paired to my phone and has, you can throw this into a backpack, take it with you hiking, camping, things like that. And it is a true meshed network. And just to show what's actually going on inside of the device, we just have to loosen these screws a little bit because I already loosened them. You're going to end up having a transceiver inside of it that is broadcasting at like 900 megahertz, and then you have the microprocessor, the display, and a battery. Let's go ahead and get this opened up. And hey, I'm doing this totally real time, live time right now. There's no fancy editing or anything to this. I actually 3D printed this case enclosure for it too. All right, there we are. Switch your camera so you can get a nice close up of it. So inside of it is this nice battery here. I put a couple pieces of foam so that it stays in place. And then moving the battery out of the way, there's the single chip, right? Or the single PCB with the chips and everything on it to make this thing work. Now on one side, you actually have the transceivers. And then on the other side, you have the processor itself along with the display. And if I do reset it here, you'll see just clicking these two buttons here will get it to reset. The display should say something about Meshtastic. I think I'm holding it upside down too. Yep. Nope, I'm not. So there's the Meshtastic doing its thing on boot up. And that is all that is inside this little 3D printed enclosure that I made. And I'm going to go ahead and put the foam pieces back inside. And I got this nice little foam that I had in the corner. And then there was one that was on the top, and that made it so that that battery did not move at all. Now, I found this particular enclosure and design online, and I modified it to fit my battery and the dimensions that I was looking for, but I'll probably share that in the video link here as well. So let's go ahead and switch back to the main camera. Okay, so I'm just going to be screwing this guy back together. You saw what's inside. It's pretty simple. It's just got the microprocessor, the transceiver, the antenna connection. That's it. There's not a lot going on here, and this thing has like more than a day of like battery life when it actually works, which is freaking cool. And you can see a lot of statistics and analytics inside of it of how it's actually operating. And I'll be diving more into that. So let me go ahead and share that screen and talk through it. So this one transceiver, you see the way it has the Bluetooth icon going to your phone. So your phone is like the input output, device. You can type and text on it. And then this device takes that material that you've typed, like if you're trying to message a single friend or on a channel to friends, it'll take that and broadcast it out onto the mesh. Now, the mesh isn't just one channel either. There's multiple channels in the mesh, and you can actually use encryption, and you can go point to point to devices. So you see the way that it says, hey, we can go ahead and go from one device to another, to another, to another. Well, they'll piggyback your message, and they might not read it. They might not understand it because it's actually encrypted from your point to point, but then it gets piggybacked through the mesh in order to actually get to its end device. So we'll do a little demonstration of that with these two devices, actually. And the way I'm doing that, I just plugged it into my computer here. And Meshtastic actually has a web interface. So if you just navigate to Meshtastic client, right there, client.meshtastic.org, go new connection, and I'm going to select my device. Boom, there it is. And inside of here, I can go ahead and select one of my other devices. I know that this particular device, right, I can go ahead and address this guy, which is the MTM device 17. So I got him selected. I'm going to click message here, and I'm going to go message. Right there. The message has appeared, and it says message from MM19. So these two mesh devices, they actually broadcasted straight across to each other. Pretty simple, right? Like, okay, so I took this, web interface, plugged it into this particular mesh device, which if I switch back to that screen so you can see it, he's plugged in via USB-C. I had the serial driver already configured so that he could talk with the web interface. Surprisingly, I didn't have to download anything. And then in using the web interface, I typed a message, clicked the device I wanted to send to, and the message went out to the mesh, which, yes, it only went like 6 inches across the table from one device to another. But yesterday I was doing testing with my car where I have a mesh node built into the car as well. I mounted a very good antenna on my car, and I'll show it here. There, let me rotate cameras. So, yep, pretty simple. I know this is silly. I'm using a camera picture to show that's off, but on the top of my car, I've got this really nice big antenna, and that allowed it to use, that meshed antenna to address devices that were really far away. And hilariously enough, using this one in my hand, typing the message on my phone, this one couldn't get out of the car. There was nothing like nearby me. There was no mesh it could connect to except for the car's mesh. From there, the node on my car broadcast out and ended up hitting other nodes nearby, which was impressive. I was like, shoot. So that was a great case in point of using mesh nodes to connect around. So let's go ahead and go back to the interface here and do something else kind of neat, which is going to open channels. So this particular channel, and what channels are, just to go to the top level, channels on a mesh node make it so that everyone who has the channel identifiers can actually hear what you're talking about. And you could send it to the mesh, and anyone with that identifier will be able to read it. So it's not just point to point, but you actually have a gridded channel all put together. So let's go ahead and just broadcast a message out. So, fasting message from PC. Now, in the bottom corner, and I'll move this out of the way so you can see it, mobile base 19, and it got an acknowledge that message was delivered, right? And what that means is somebody who had this primary channel also received the message. Now, even better, this one's just turned on right now for the first time talking to this computer, but this guy I've been using for like weeks, And he has a whole list of open messages that have been coming from everybody that's on the grid. And if we go look at the map, we could see that in northern Arizona, where we're about, there's a lot of devices that are all over. And each one of these is actually a Meshtastic node, which is pretty freaking amazing. A lot of people actually have these mesh nodes, and it's tying all of this together to make it so that we can communicate. And from, sure enough, this device, I can broadcast and it bounces off those nodes to go to pretty much everyone else. So this is a off network texting and locating beacon type device that is open source, and you can get your hands on, the source code and tie it into other devices like Arduinos, RC cars, and things like that. Now, you'll see this particular device. I have my location kind of blocked on it where it's showing up in the wrong area, but it looks like it's in the middle of everything where you can kind of see, oh, it's picking up these other nodes. And sure enough, when I've done point to point contacts, it does bounce between nodes to be able to talk to some of the further away ones from me, such as MR, which I am not near that one. That's up here. And sure enough, it hops around some of the other nodes, surprisingly, one of them behind it, which means it's probably on a very tall hill where it was able to actually get to that node and allow me to text back and forth. So this gives you the ability to offline communicate with friends or anything like that. And the biggest thing that I noticed it for was like we go camping a lot. And I like getting out into the wilderness. And when I'm out in the wilderness, we get ourselves off grid to the point where it's like radios start to have trouble because you broadcast and one person hears you, but not everybody, and it's not very clear. And with this and the way that it works, it's been astounding to see the way that it can just like bridge gaps that I haven't been able to bridge before legally, and because you can't go buy it, and you can buy any kind of radio that has a lot of power and bridge a gap that you shouldn't, but this gives you the ability to do so, to send your location and text back and forth when you're off grid. Now, I also want to break this one open and show you what's going on the inside of this guy too. So let's go ahead and second camera here. So we opened this one earlier and talked about it, but inside this guy, same kind of deal. We do have the antenna up top. There is a GPS that's also embedded up top here in this 3D printed enclosure that I have. It has its control interfaces here, and then it does have a USB-C on the side, the main circuit card along the top there, and at the bottom you also have the large battery. So there's not a lot that's going on inside that device that I can just simply throw into my backpack, take on a camping trip, and use when I'm out and about. Now, going back to it with the way these systems work, right? This antenna gets some pretty good range, but the whole idea of the mesh grid is I want to use the mesh to be able to talk to the other people around me. So that was why I have, that's why I also have a device on my car. And when we're off-roading, it's the one that makes it so that, hey, it has the good antenna. It's got the good transceiver on it that's very short from it. And it's tied in to make it so that you have another mesh node that can hop even further distances. So using even something simple like this antenna here, you can get yourself to go a much further distance than if you were trying to use, this little antenna here. Now, this is good for putting on your person, having on your backpack, hiking around, camping, doing your thing. You can go ahead and communicate with this pretty well to your friends that are local nearby. But if you have the option where it's like, hey, my car is parked on the top of that hill and we're all hiking down to different parts of the mountain, or you're hiking up the mountain, if someone gets into a valley, they'll only be able to hit the person that's next line of sight, really, if there's a lot of trees and obstructions. And having a base node that like lives at your car, it's plugged in with its own battery, and maybe it charges when you're driving, and then even when the car's off, hey, okay, it's just got enough power to run for like 12 hours or something. That's what this is really capable of doing. And what I've noticed is like this device here, this one actually has days of battery life, which is pretty freaking awesome. And the other device that you saw here that's a little more rugged, it looks like it's about a day as well. Now, that is in a area that's very busy. Let's go back to the monitor. So when we look over this area, there's a lot of nodes and there's a lot of traffic. And what I noticed in the data is that, yeah, it's getting about as much traffic to like max it out for inbound outbounds. And that's for the duty cycle of like 20% or so, which means, yeah, okay, so under heavy load, it lasted for a few days. Well, what happens when it's not under heavy load if you're actually in the wilderness and the idle looks like it's multiple days, which is pretty cool. So it's like, hey, if you're actually taking this camping, exploring, or something like that, and you get one that's ruggedized for like, being waterproof and just tucked away in your backpack, well, you'll be pretty good. And you also saw it, these devices are pretty small. They're like that's pretty compact right there. And I built this one so that it does have the screen visible, but you could also make it so it isn't visible and has the USB-C port covered to make it so that hey, it's not going to be exposed to the elements or get water or something in it. And then there's obviously, this one where you could have more controls and more capabilities, but you don't necessarily have to make everything addressable from the outside or, not actually have it just right here, but bake it under a cover or something like that. So pretty neat just looking at the devices and seeing how Meshtastic works. So I want to show something else that blew me away on this, which is that Meshtastic made it easy to be able to update the software with just a online tool. You're not downloading anything. You just plug in your device and go. So if we take a look, I've just got my device here and it's plugged in on the USB-C. And then if we go over to the main monitor here, I'm just on the web flasher. So let's go flasher. We could auto detect the device, connect. And it's saying connection failed because it's currently being used by my web client here. But you simply just select your target device. And let's say we had the LilyGo T Echo. You select that version of software you want and you just click flash. That's it. It was that easy. So from literally plugging the device in and opening a web tool that doesn't actually require you to do anything else, it was that simple to go ahead and use. So flashing with Meshtastic was a solid choice. I'm glad they made it that way. And then on top of that, there's also, the online tool so that you could go ahead and actually address your device internally. So I got the tool open here and you could see all the nodes that are near us, quite a few. You could see the reception on them. You could see their timestamps when they were last seen. You can go ahead and select a node and say, I want to send a message to this guy. And I'll say, hello. And you might end up hearing that. Yeah, it's chirping, right? To let me know I got a message. So pretty intuitive, worked pretty well when plugged into the computer, but then there's the flip side of the phone app. So obviously I've got that one node that's plugged into my computer with the USB-C, but simply opening the Meshtastic app makes it so that, hey, I can go ahead and connect to my radio, which it just did. It's connected to this guy here. And that now makes it so I can open up messages. And there's two things that the messages have built in, one of which I'm getting messages from the actual, app on all of the things going on in our local traffic. This guy's picking up a lot. So with that said, there's the main channels that you can configure. And right here is a nice channel list. And I just configured the first two. One with a open channel that everyone gets by default that has no encryption or anything like that. And it shows a nice little, unlocked key versus the one below it where I made a channel for me and my devices that is locked. So let's go ahead and go to the open channel and we'll type something back and go like, hello. So I just typed in hello and it acknowledged, which means someone on the local Meshtastic grid indeed received that message and now it's, being broadcasted around to everybody else. Now, same thing as you saw in the web app that we had open a moment ago. We also have a map here too. So this is where you can now see all the devices that are around you, which could include your friends that you're sharing locations with. So that's kind of neat. And let me go ahead and show you from the monitor because I did send that hello if the hello arrived. So if we go messages and we go primary, look at that, MTM device 17, hello. And you could even react to it if you wanted to. So it's saying message delivered. But let's go a little further. If we type the actual name of it up there, you can see the whole list of nodes that are nearby us. And MTM 17 is one of those devices. So I'm going to go ahead and click test. And you should see a pop-up notification showed up on my phone. And what do you know? There's a list of messages that we've sent so far to this device, right? So that's what this guy here who likes to chirp when it receives something, which is why this one's good to have like on your backpack or on your person, because if you have it back there and you're carrying your phone with you, okay, there you go, you're getting mesh transmissions in and out. So that is Meshtastic in a nutshell, just at a very top level. And that was like primarily what I wanted to touch on for this stream, and just going through some of the details that you can truly use, a LoRa based network. And then LoRa stands for long range, by the way, so that you can take what would have been your cell phone that is off grid. If you're somewhere where there's no reception and you can't talk to your friends because, there's hills and obstructions, or heck, even cave diving, something like that, you can mesh through and actually talk to each other through a mesh. And if you have a shared channel, which is honestly my favorite part to this whole thing, is that it wasn't just built in mind with like one device to another, but it was designed so that you could piggyback of like, hey, here's a common channel and a common name, and we can all talk to each other. So not to be a prepper or post-apocalyptic, but more, it's a tool that I think is really useful when camping or hiking or somewhere that you're a little more off grid and want to be able to communicate amongst each other. Now, where it also becomes really useful, you could just see it from this web page here. This is essentially open source. So if we go into the GitHub page at the very top, you can grab the source code. You can see right here, there it is in Python, firmware, Meshtastic code source itself, the web interface. They put everything out there so that you could integrate this in with a project that you might be doing. So what I like about that is the potential future capability of, okay, it's a messy part of like, radio RF channeling and stuff like that you're taking advantage of. But when you're pushing small pieces of data that just need to like get to a device, tell it what to do, and then leaves, and you get to piggyback off of a mesh where maybe you wouldn't have been able to actually communicate point to point to that device, or you would have to put like a cell network to it to talk to it, even though it's like in your backyard. Well, why do that when you could do simple communication using this Meshtastic system? So open source, decentralized mesh networking, right? Like it's pretty golden in my opinion. I think it's really cool. And going further into that hobby range of like Meshtastic and what we're talking about on this, let's look at devices. So I'm going to grab this right over here. So supported device hardware, right? The firmware can be installed on a wide range of dev boards, and that's really what's over here. These are like Arduinos, like think of an Espressif 32, right? So it's a simple ESP32, and multiple of these are Espressifs, I believe. Yeah, there we go. LoRa 32s, Haltix. And then when you go look at the LilyGo, I think those ones were based on, yeah, they got their own like proprietary, no, it's ESP32s for those ones too. So common hardware that you can procure out on the market, and you'd be able to start to deploy and use a mesh grid. Now, here's the next question that shows up is how much are these things, right? And here's no joke an Amazon link to two of them. There you go. Has a little antenna, shows the actual device, 40 bucks. They're like 20 bucks a piece. Now, better ones, because this one doesn't have a battery, it would just be this straight device. Like if you wanted to plug it into your computer and then run an antenna out your window or something, yeah, you can get an antenna for like 10 bucks and consider yourself good, right? But let's go a little further and say, well, what if you got something that's all enclosed and has a battery? And this is one that you could throw in your backpack. There it is right there, right? 80 bucks versus you could go down to like 60 bucks for this one right here. And Yeah, I obviously have a couple of these, and I also got this guy, which is what you saw me using here, right? That's what I 3D printed this enclosure to be able to put that Meshtastic node inside of a nice case. And it has, as you see in the image there, an actual GPS and the antenna, along with the battery and the RF cable that I routed through this small enclosure. Now, I did it for both of these nodes here that I wanted to be able to carry with me, whether I'm carrying the one that's a little more rugged because I want to throw it in there and not worry about it, or I have the one that does have a display where I could just glance at the message if I need to. Now, what is good about the one with the display is that it seems to cache the messages for you so that when you do connect to it next time, it pulls all the messages up and shows it to you. Unlike if we look back at our web app, right? This one just shows the couple messages here. It doesn't show the whole list. There was actually a lot more messages on the primary channel that have happened over the past couple days. And this guy has been on the whole time, but he doesn't seem to cache them and then save them forward for you. Meanwhile, this other device does. So that's something just to keep in mind as you're using these. Now, if I was to recommend anything to anyone for it, it's like, hey, first you're gonna need like the use case. When it comes to Meshtastic, right? Why would you even want to do this? It's because you have a situation where you probably can't communicate locally, whether it's an event as well that's just so impacted that you can't talk to each other, right? This would work. It makes it so you can target a message straight to your friends, create a little group that you talk to each other with, and then Meshtastic will be able to handle it for you. You simply have the app open and this device somewhere in your pocket or your bag or whatever, and now you're able to send and receive data that if you can't get your phone to work, you can at least send messages of, hey, I'll meet you by the car, or I'll meet you by gate A1, right? If you're out in the middle of the wilderness, hey, I'm heading to Hell Trailhead blank, and we'll see you there. This enables you to have an off-grid, offline communication device that is encrypted as well. Now, there is that second part, encrypted. If you are sending something that's a little bit more secure, yeah, you have encryption that's true point to point and doesn't rely on a network. And it's totally legal to use. So you can actually talk amongst each other. So that's Meshtastic in a nutshell, covering over the devices, covering over how it works. So, yeah. And this was my very first stream, by the way. So I hope this was somewhat valuable. Covered about 30 minutes going into Meshtastic and how it's being used. So this was a coverage of Meshtastic. I walked through all the details of how you can program these small mesh-based devices. This little guy right here can be carried with you and allow you to communicate with your friends and family, whether you're hiking or camping, or if you're actually in a venue where you just cannot get reception because there's so many people there. This is a off-grid, off-network communication device that has a long battery life and allows you to bridge the gap that really we're running into a little bit with our network-enabled communication devices, our cell phones, right? Where literally this text stream that you see here is not my default texting app. It is Meshtastic using this device here that you can get for less than 20, $30. So I hope that was useful.